This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, here on March the 6th, 2022. We got snow falling out there, and I'm going to tell you, it's a hard work week for me, but I'm going to tell you the payoff comes when we celebrate the life and the career of a fantastic entertainer. Yes, folks, I've had my guest on tonight probably more than anybody. He's joined me now, as of tonight, 5 tribute interviews, and he's been on 3 times just talking about his own career. Folks, I give you the wonderful, talented Geoffrey Mark, and we are here to celebrate the legacy of his friend, Milton Berle. How do you do, Geoffrey Mark?
I do just fine, Greg Gilbert.
Look at you, all sparkly. Was Milton Berle a sparkly guy?
He didn't need sparkles. That came from inside of him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. We got snow going down outside there today. Do you got I suppose you guys don't see that kind of stuff.
Thank heavens. That's why I live here in Palm Springs. So pussycat. So I don't have to deal with snow. But we had a rainstorm last night and a windstorm yesterday, and today it's cool but sunny.
Skittles, what is your favorite Milton Berle movie? Skittles says Milton who? Milton Berle. Skittles says it's a mad, 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 mad world.
And I agree with him 100% because Milton didn't make that many movies. But the one that has stood the test of time and is the funniest film ever made, it's a mad, 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 mad world. And there's wonderful stories about the making of that film and stuff that was going on backstage because it just works out that way. The film starred Sid Caesar, whom I talked with about the film, and Milton, who I talked with about the film, and Edie Adams, who I talked with about the film, and Ethel Merman, who I talked with about the film, and Buddy Hackett I've gotten to know so many of the people who were in it, even Peter Falk, who played a cab driver. He wasn't a big star yet. There was so much going on in the making of that thing. And then, of course, I'm happy that Stanley Kramer's widow, Karen, and his daughter, Kat Kramer, are friends of mine. So that's an important film in my life, but it's the funniest thing Milton ever did.
It's funny because 2 years later, Peter Falk would be involved in another madcap movie called The Great Race.
Yeah, but one has nothing to do with the other.
Yeah.
But let's not lead our friends astray. Milton Berle, although he made movies, was not known as a movie star. He was a comedian who appeared in films. But his fame, his lasting fame, was on Broadway, in vaudeville when he was 12, silent films he made as a little boy, but as a nightclub performer, and then of course the king of television, Mr. Television. Milton's legendary status starts in 1948 when he becomes the host of Texaco Star Theater, which eventually became the Milton Berle Show.
Talk about the first time you met Milton Berle.
I would love to. It was scary. Quite frankly, I was frightened. My friend Jack Carter, another legendary comedian, was taking me to lunch at the world famous Beverly Hills Friars Club, which I eventually became a member of. But I'd never been there before this date. And we had a date for lunch with Milton and his best friend, head writer, Buddy Arnold. So it was Jack Carter and me and Milton and Buddy Arnold. And we sat at Milton's table at the Friars Club. What do you say to someone who is so accomplished? And Milton was not a bombast. He saved all the bombastic stuff when the cameras were on or in front of an audience, with a mic in his face, with a light in his head. When he was off stage, he could be funny, but he was often more serious and a little more laid back. So we're sitting there and we order our food. What do you say? And I'm thinking to myself, and this is true, and this is a thought I have muddled over many times in my show business career. Geoffrey Mark, you get one chance to make a good first impression. What are you going to do here? And I could sense being a fawning fan wasn't going to do any good. Milton Berle had fawning fans up the ass. He didn't need me to fawn all over him. I didn't know it then. I found this out later. It was a hunch that Milton loved to talk about the history of show business. So my opening, I didn't even say hello, really. I said, on March 22nd, 1949, you had Ethel Merman on Metexico Star Theater. It was her television debut. She had just closed in Annie Get Your Gun. And the two of you did a sketch. And he held up two fingers twice the size of mine, but very arthritic. They were kind of bony. And he did one of those Three Stooges jabs in the eyes. And I did it at the same moment. What had happened was Milton and Merman were supposed to do a sketch about turn of the 20th century car riders in car coats and outfits and an old jalopy that would lead into the song Friendship, which Merman had introduced on Broadway, a Cole Porter song. Now, Merman had been told that what Milton liked to do was grab someone by their left shoulder and push them, literally causing you to go upstage. That's where the term upstaging comes from, so that he'd be facing the audience, but you'd be facing him. Well, Ethel Merman by this point had done 10 or 11 hit Broadway musicals. She wasn't going to let anybody upstage her. So in that costume, she put little and very, very, very thin push pins going up so that you couldn't see them on stage. You couldn't see them in the light, but if someone grabbed her shoulder, ouch. So they start singing. If you're ever in a jam, here I am. And at one point he goes to do it. And you see the look on his face when they weren't sharp enough to make him bleed or anything. They were sharp enough to say, lay off me. Well, Ethel Merman was Ethel Merman, but Milton Berle was Milton Berle. He just undoes her. He undoes she had a scarf, like I have, a scarf around her neck. He chokes her with it. She's wearing a hat. He turns it around. He pokes her in the eye. He goes under her throat when she's trying to sing to show her, you don't do this to Milton Berle. Now, mind you, this is on live television. It's not like they're going to say, cut, let's do this over again. This is what the audience is getting at home. And they go through this song. They lose where they are. They couldn't hear the orchestration from the audience screaming. And the end of the song, there's this little thing. Merman did it on Broadway with Bert Lahr originally. And the song ends with a woof, 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 a tweet, 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 a peck, peck, peck. Well, Milton doesn't let it go. Ooh, rah, 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 ning, ning, ning. And Merman just has enough. She shoves him. It's over already. Good evening, friends. It stops the show cold. They couldn't go on. The audience had to scream and yell for a while. That was my opening remark to Milton. And he says to me, how do you know this? I said, well, I have a copy of the show. I have a copy of the Kinescope. He says, I don't. I said, you do now? And that's how Milton and I became friends. He was impressed that someone in those days, I'm going back almost 30 years ago, someone that young knew so much. And then we started talking about vaudeville that I knew the difference between Swain's Rats and Cats and Fink's Mules as an opening act, that I understood how vaudeville worked, that I understood the history of radio and his history on radio, that I knew the history of the Friars Club. Just not that I'm so wonderful, but he appreciated someone who knew the history of these things. That's what Milton loved to do. He loved to talk about show business history. And then he had his, long before David Letterman, top 10 lists, you know, top 10 women in vaudeville who had the biggest breasts, top 10 non-Jewish comedians in vaudeville, top 10 not Italian singers in Hollywood. And you'd play these games with him. It was a lot of fun, but you had to know what you were talking about or you couldn't play the game. I don't mean you'd be lousy at it. I mean, he wouldn't let you play the game unless you knew what you were talking about. And every game he brought up, I scored. And he that bony finger again, he says, young man, back when people called me young man, you know things. Now I'm going to tell you some truths. And he told me some things I'll probably never publish because they're terribly personal, about himself and other celebrities that surprised me. But I'm not going to besmirch someone's memory by sharing what Milton said. I'm going to assume he was telling me the truth because he had no reason to lie, but it's not stuff he ever spoke about in public. It's not in any of his books, and it's not going to be in any of my books either. So we became friends.
Yeah. Wow. And you know what? It's like you said, you know, you get only one chance to make a first impression. And when you make that first impression, it's a connection that is built on respect, you know.
Well, I guess I did well that day because after, golly, a couple of hours of our talking together. So this was we lunched all afternoon. I mean, it was dinner time when we finished. And at one point he got up to go to the men's room. And Milton goes, come with me. And Buddy Arnold said, yeah, go with him. Now, I must tell you, I knew it was coming because I had heard stories. Milton Berle, how do I say this nicely so we can keep this clean? Milton Berle was well known within the industry for having an extraordinarily long, flaccid penis. Flaccid penis. So if he liked you, if he trusted you, and I'm sorry about the lighting here, it's coming and going. The sun is coming in and out of my house.
That's okay.
If he liked you, he took you to the men's room and he pulled it out and showed it to you. It was kind of a rite of passage, like, you know, here it is, and now you belong, you're part of my world. And he did. Now, he was in his late 80s then. I mean, it wasn't like he wasn't flirting with me. He wasn't going to get an erection and expect something to happen. Milton was straight. For all the cross-dressing he did as shtick, Milton was straight. But, and here's a story about the club and that. Now, this happened before I met Milton. This story was told to me by Milton and Buddy Arnold at that first lunch. Milton ran the Friars Club. I mean, whether he was the abbot at that moment or not, he ran the Friars Club. He was there every day. He knew every single member. He knew what you've done. He knew what project you're working on right now. He knew who your manager was. I mean, he knew stuff. And at the Friars Club, there was a gym. And in the gym, there was a sauna, steam room thing to relax because it was a men's club until the 90s where they started letting women in. And Milton and Buddy were coming out of either the steam room or the sauna. Let's say it was the steam room, makes it funnier. But true, wrapped in a towel. And a guy walks up to them and says, hey, Berle, I hear you got a big one. Mine's bigger than yours. $100, I'm bigger than you. Now, I've already told you if Milton liked you and trusted you, that was one thing. Also, you're in show business. But strangers, no, 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 no. Milton was, again, he was not a bombast. He was kind of shy with strangers, especially at the Friars Club. And he said, look, sir, since I don't know you, you're not a member. That means you're a guest here. So please be a guest. This is inappropriate. Go find the person who brought you. Please enjoy our food, enjoy our club, go up to our smoking room and have a Havana cigar, go play cards, whatever you'd like, have a drink. But this is inappropriate. Well, the guy was tenacious. Come on, Berle, $100. Put up or shut up, put up or shut up, put up or shut up. Finally, to defrost the whole thing, Bunny Arnold says, oh, Milton, just pull out enough to win. That tells you how famous it was and how big it was. You know, you have to pull all of it out, just enough to win.
Just enough to win. Wow. Well, you know what? That guy.
I'd love to know who it was, but it was like some show business person brought his accountant kind of thing, or his lawyer, or his tailor, as a, you know, hey, come to the club, I'll treat you to lunch. So it wasn't anybody any of us knew, or Milton would have said who it was. Milton was a very private person, which is almost a dichotomy, because he was so public. He was in the public eye constantly. There were times in his life where Milton would be, let's say he was starring at the Copacabana nightclub in New York, 2 shows a night. In between the 2 shows, he would go to everybody else's nightclubs and come in and do 5 minutes on stage with them. And then maybe he'd do 2 benefits that night. He just worked constantly. But his private life, his off stage life, he kept very, very private and kind of shy. And as you got to know him, you realize that, and I've said this about myself, I'm the luckiest son of a bitch in the world. You know, I met the love of my life at 13. I got into show business at 15. All these years later, here you're still talking to me. But there's a price to pay for that. Personally, sometimes, financially, sometimes. Milton had the pushiest stage mother in history. And there was a price to pay for that. Milton, even though his mother died in the 1950s, it's my opinion that Milton never shook her off. Whatever he did, his mother's name was Sarah. Whatever he did, Sarah was still talking in his ear. We lived in Southern California. One day we didn't go to the Friars Club. There was an Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills called Cafe Roma. And in the 90s, that was the place to go for lunch. Everybody in show business ate there. And we were having lunch one day. Jack Carter, Jerry Vale, Milton Berle, Robert Clary, just a whole bunch of us were eating lunch at this very long table. And it was about 83, 84 degrees out. Milton had a trench coat on. Why? Because Sarah did it in his ear. You got to wear a coat. You might catch a cold. You can't miss a show. You can't get a breeze. You can't get a draft. You can't. What people from my background would say a mishigas, a Yiddish word for a neurosis, a craziness. Milton had several of those, and it all came from his mother. The show was the thing. You have to guard. You have to do. You have to push. You have to. I think it's why Milton enjoyed the Friars Club so much, because he could go there and relax. He didn't have to push so much. People came to him. He could just sit down at his table with his buddy, and people just came to him. He didn't have to, grab the mic for attention or push someone out of the spotlight. Things he did sometimes. But personally, shy. I liked him. I liked his wisdom. I liked that he gave. I wasn't the only young person he helped. I mean, it's not that, Milton only helped Geoffrey Mark. No, no, no. There were dozens of us he was helping with timing. That's not a good joke. That's not a good punchline. You should wait 3 beats more to say that kind of thing. Milton, like Rip Taylor, which is the reason I wear the sparkles, said, you got to find a hook. You're very talented, but you have no hook. What's your hook? Find something. Well, for me, it became the sparkly stuff. But that's the kind of help Milton would give people. And he did it all his life. Milton was in his 80s when I was there. Milton joined the Friars Club when he was 12.
Oh, wow.
Eddie Cantor, who was back in the 19 teens and 20s and early 30s, a Broadway and vaudeville star, almost equal to Al Jolson, equal to Ethel Merman or Mary Martin of later years, equal to Bernadette Peters or Chita Rivera more recently, extraordinarily well known. Milton was on Broadway, and Milton was precocious. He already understood joke structure, and he was a massive, massive wit. He could just think of things. And then once he had something, he remembered it forever. So if he couldn't come up with something fresh, he could instantly remember something from 40 years ago. So at 12, there he was. And they sat him down with the other members thinking, oh, yeah, this 12-year-old kid. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he destroyed them. He did like a little mini roast of the people who were sitting there. And he was brilliant. And he was accepted. And from that point forward, both in New York and in California, he was a friar.
Do you remember the last conversation you had with Milton before he had passed away?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Milton had sold his Milton had been married for many years to a woman named Ruth, who everybody loved.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth Berle got very, very ill. When Lucille Ball was dying in the hospital, Ruth was like 2 doors down dying. And Milton was going back and forth between the 2 rooms visiting. Because Milton and Lucille Ball were very close.
Mm-hmm.
And had been very close since the early 30s. Because Milton had known Miss Ball when she was a model, before anybody knew her. He kind of, ooh, she's special, and dated her for a while. Ruth died, I think, within 24 hours of Lucille. Milton couldn't face the house and remarried. He wanted companionship. So they bought a large apartment on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills going towards Westwood. There is this long corridor of what is unusual in Los Angeles, which is high-rise apartment buildings. Like you'd find in New York or Chicago or San Francisco. There aren't that many of them. And most of them exist in that corridor. And they had a lovely, large place there. And I sensed that perhaps time was getting short for him. His energy level had gone down. He wasn't coming out as much. He wasn't coming to the club as much. He wasn't lunching as much. If he appeared on a sitcom, quite often they had to film him separately. So he remembering lines and whatever he had to do. And I said, good heavens, I don't have a picture. And I asked him to autograph a picture for me. And I have it. And that was the last time I saw him.
Wow. You remember where you were when he had passed away?
Yeah. I was in my apartment in Hollywood, and I immediately went to the Friars Club because that's where he was going to be remembered the most. And just every comedian who had known him was there. And people who weren't comedians necessarily. Several movie stars were there. I mean, classic Sid Charisse was there, kind of thing. Phyllis Diller was there. I'm getting a little choked up. Forgive me. Just lots and lots of people. Tony Martin was there. So MGM, glory stars, people Milton had worked with on radio, on television. Whichever Friars Club members weren't working that day, we were all there and sitting around and doing his lists. What do you do? It's when a man lives into his 90s, you can't say it's too early for him to go. You can't. I mean, you can, but it's kind of silly to. You're grateful you had him. You're grateful you knew him. You're grateful he was around so long. I mean, look at that timeline. Eddie Cantor in the 19 teens, Geoffrey Mark in the 1990s. That's a long span to be a star and to be giving of your talent to people and to be everybody's friend. Anybody who had any kind of comedic talent or singing talent, I mean, good singing talent. Milton Berle loved talent. He loved his fellow workers. He loved people in the business. He and Rose Marie, in fact, it is Sunday as we are recording this. This is a cup and saucer from Rose Marie. When I used to go visit her in her house, this is the china set. She used to feed me coffee. When she passed away, her daughter Nubi, lovely, gave me a cup and saucer. So every Sunday I have coffee with Rosie. But Rosie and Milton had the same kind of thing. It's almost like being in show business was like being in the military. And they referred to anybody who wasn't in it as a civilian. Oh, he's a civilian. He doesn't understand. And they didn't have a whole lot of patience for civilians. They wanted to talk about show business. I don't know that kind of person exists anymore. They lived, ate, breathed, and slept show business. They had marriages, they had children. I'm not saying they didn't have personal lives, but everything other than dinner with the kids and Christmas and everything else was show business. And I guess I'm the same way. Maybe I'm the last of the old guard who kind of lives that way, but he lived for it. He was groomed for it from his earliest days doing Charlie Chaplin impressions. So how far back are we going with that? When his mother schlepped him from the Bronx in New York, all over New York City to audition for anything, anywhere. And then once he hit a little bit and got into shows, touring with him all over the country, sharing a room with him, long after it was appropriate for her to be sharing a room with him. I'm not implying they had anything disgusting going on, but he had no privacy. And when he became old enough, I'm going on a different tack here, but when he got old enough that his interest in girls would blossom, his mother interfered. No one was going to date him. Instead, she'd hire prostitutes and introduce them to her son as nice girls. Oh, why don't you take this nice girl out for dinner tonight? And she realized that if she kept his sex life happy, he wouldn't want a woman, a wife, because Sarah was terrified that if he had a wife, she'd be out the door. And as far as she was concerned, she and Milton were a couple. It was their career, which is, I'm sorry, it's sick. It was a sick thing to do. You love your child. You want to help them have a career? Great. And then when they have it, let go. It wasn't her career. It was his career. But Sarah Berle, the Marx Brothers had a mother like that, Minnie. But when they became famous, Minnie retired. Once the job was done, Minnie didn't need to be on top of it all the time. Minnie could enjoy the money and, play poker with her friends and enjoy life. Sarah wouldn't give it up. It was their career. I think that relationship so colored who Milton was, how he related to women, how he related to other people, firing that need to always be the one. Why he would do what he did to Ethel Merman, kind of thing, because it was just instilled in him. He had to be the one. It's a long in show business story. It isn't just Milton. Of very, very, very famous people who aren't terribly happy.
Oh, yeah. I see that. You never believe how many people just in me doing podcasts. I do this because I enjoy it. I love having somebody like yourself come on here for your vast knowledge, and you're so well spoken, and talk about either yourself or the people we're tributing, like Milton Berle, and fascinating to me. And then there's others that treat this like, well, with social media, everybody's got a platform. And it's like everybody's looking for the quick way to make an easy buck, and
You mean they're not happy with the $2,000 you're paying us to be here?
yeah.
He's not paying us anything to be here. That was a joke. I had this discussion once with my publicist, Harlan Bowl, who you know.
Yeah, I got a lot of respect for him.
And Harlan said to me, how much more famous do you want to be? I mean, you got the Emmy Award sitting behind you here. You've got this. I've been in show business 48 years at this point. How much more famous? Well, I'll get as famous as my talent allows. But I have tried, and probably not succeeded, but I have tried to give my personal life a fair shake. Mm-hmm. We have already discussed my very long time companion who died 3 years ago, that we never lived together. And that it's a long story, folks. Greg will have this up someplace posted. You can go back and look at the story we told back then. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't always happy living that way. It isn't happy always living from paycheck to paycheck. Meaning, you're a celebrity. You're Milton Berle. All right. For 8 seasons, Milton Berle had his own television show and made a lot of money. A lot of money. Then Milton had a contract with NBC that paid him so much a year just to keep him attached to NBC. Much, much less than he was making every week. Well, and then that expired. Well, he may play Vegas for a month and make a lot of money, and then he may not work for 2 months. People less famous than Milton may not work for 6 months. There are big time actors. Yeah, they make a lot of money to be in a film, but then they don't work for 2 years. That's hard on a person. You don't have a steady income. You don't know how to make a budget. You don't know how much your next paycheck is going to be or when you're getting it. Being in show business is very expensive. Costuming and makeup and everything you need to look well costs a lot of money. And whether you're having an income or not, you still have to spend the money. So show business is a hard business. Everybody I've ever met who really, really, really made it in the business all say the same thing. If you don't need to be in show business, do something else. Join some community players and do some amateur theatrics, satisfy yourself creatively, but go be an accountant, because the business is so hard. Unless you have to be in it, don't do it. See, I had to be in it. There was just, for my soul, there was nothing else I could do.
And you're fantastic at it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's nice. Thank you. Yay.
You're welcome.
I hope so. I hope after all of these years,
actually, I'm going to tell you, when one of your interviews went up the other night, It was the one where you sang,
Ah,
and somebody put a comment saying encore and put the times when that happened, and I was like, yeah, that's my feeling exactly, like
I'll tell you what.
uh-huh.
I am recording an album this summer, and when the album is in the can, we'll do this, and I'll sing some of it for you. We'll debut some of. I'll sing it live. We'll debut some of my music.
Sure, that sounds fantastic. Absolutely, yeah. But you mentioned your award behind you. What was Milton Berle's um, approach when it come to winning awards? Was it kind of like surreal for him, or was it something where he saw hard work paying off? Like,
It was all. I'll stop you right there. It was
mhm.
all publicity. Do you have a show? Are you making money? Are the people liking you? Are you a success? Yeah, great. That's what he needed. The awards come and go. He knew he was never going to win an Oscar. There are, or there used to be, no awards for nightclub work. There was for a little while in the late 60s and 70s. There were the Georgie Awards for nightclub work, and it came and went. It didn't stick. His Broadway work long preceded the Tony Awards. They didn't come around to the late 40s. Uh, so the only other awards he was really going to get would have been like an Emmy, which he won, a Lifetime Achievement Award Emmy, which he won, and the plaques and things you get for doing charity work. And he had a room filled with that kind of stuff. His award was the next job, the next show, getting booked, getting good billing, getting good money, and doing really, really well. That's it's blinders. It's the focus is so narrow. And then his off time, he didn't lie on a beach. He was at the Friars Club, or he was at other clubs, other theatrical clubs to which he belonged, or he was doing charity work and appearing all over the world just to raise money. He was part of the Kennedy campaign in 1960 politically. He campaigned for President Kennedy. The man's incredible energy. It's amazing to me. He lived into his 90s
Yeah.
because I'm much younger than my 90s, and
You're 39.
I'm God bless you. See, you're not just a pretty face, you're smart. um I have days where, like, ooh, I don't have it, I'm tired. I never heard Milton say he was tired. You could see him being tired. He walked slowly, purposefully, partly because he was getting older and partly because he did not want to slip and fall. Very aware that it could be that, one split second, and all of a sudden Milton's a cripple and can't be on stage. So, but he was just, I never heard Milton couldn't make it. I never heard Milton uh, canceled a gig or refused to appear at a charity function. If he was asked, he went. And he was so really loved by everybody in the business. And obviously, the American public loved him because there are wonderful, extraordinarily talented people out there in the business, but you don't know their names. They never broke through for one reason or another. Milton was a household name, and he knew it, and he loved it.
What charities was he big on supporting? Like, what was he passionate about?
I think he was passionate about being seen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to make it sound like he wasn't happy to do charity work. He was, but to him, it was another audience. Certainly, he did work for St. Jude's because he knew Danny Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Milton hosted the first ever telethon for the Heart Fund. So he worked for the Heart Fund. Celebrities are asked to be involved by charities. Usually it's a charity going to a celebrity, not the celebrity going to a charity. Um, my charity work was because I was asked. I got involved with the Make-A-Wish Foundation because God bless this child, her wish was me. Why me? I don't know. The Lucy book. She was a big fan of a Lucy book, and her wish was to spend time with me. Of course I'll do that. But I didn't go to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and say, hey, you got any Geoffrey Mark fans who want to hang out with me? That's not how it works. So wherever Milton was asked, he was a Democrat. He did do some political work earlier in his life. After a while, he didn't do it anymore. It got hard in Hollywood when people like Ronald Reagan were running, because these people could be your friend, but not necessarily your political party. And a lot of people stopped doing political stuff, showing up because, well, I don't want to hurt my friend's feelings, kind of thing. But
yeah, I get that.
He did whatever he wanted, really. And I think, all careers do this, up and down kind of thing. I'm sure there were years where he was asked less. I'm sure after It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, he was asked more. After appearing on The Nanny with Fran Drescher, I'm sure he was asked more. It's the same thing with me. I can always tell when something I've done is on television or on radio or somewhere or a platform where all of a sudden people are like, they're noticing me more. Something I've done has just recently been on television. Hey, I saw you, kind of thing. Even for big stars, that happens.
Well, I was looking through Milton Berle's credits, and one movie I noticed that he made a cameo, and I've seen this movie. In fact, I saw this movie at the drive-in, and I always looked at it as a badge of honor when celebrities get to work on the Muppets. And of course, he was in the original Muppet movie, and got to interact with the Muppets. Do you have any stories about him being approached for that, and his thoughts on doing it?
I have, see, if I were Milton Berle, this is what Milton would do. This is a good question because it gives you a good example of Milton. I honestly don't have a story about how he was approached.
Mm-hmm.
Milton would make one up. If you were asking Milton, Milton, do you have any memory about that little girl wanting Geoffrey Mark on the make? Oh, yes. I was having lunch with Geoffrey when it happened, and he would tell you truths, except Milton was nothing to do with that. But he put himself there, and he would tell you. Milton didn't let the truth get in the way of a good story. It isn't that he lied necessarily. It's just that he danced around the truth. He thought Jim Henson, this much I do know, was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And the show, the Muppet Show, was so successful in syndication. And of course, Milton had known Jim Henson for years because Milton knew everybody. And if you had talent, you were in Milton's sphere. Jim Henson and Frank Oz were the best at what they did.
Yeah.
So it was everybody I knew. I don't know of anyone who went, I had to go on that stupid Muppet Show. Everybody loved being there. And Milton enjoyed being there. He enjoyed being on the show. He enjoyed being in the film. He enjoyed being anywhere where he could perform. Milton enjoyed being. I don't think in his mind there were too many. Ooh, this is like incredibly special. No, it's another show. It's another appearance. It's another nightclub gig. It's another night of doing my act to raise money for this charity. There were a few things that meant a lot to him. And I'm losing the name of a film. In fact, I'm gonna stall for a second and look it up because it's important. Because while It's a Mad, 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 Mad World was the funniest film Milton Berle ever made,
Hmm.
Milton made a movie in the late 40s, in between seasons
Hmm.
of the Texaco Star Theater. And it was a film where he's kind of sort of playing a version of himself, um, old vaudevillians. It's called Always Leave Them Laughing.
Okay.
It was not, it has not been shown on television the way it should be shown because it's an extraordinary example of Milton at the height of his powers doing his own material, doing classic vaudeville and burlesque routines, and being an actor. And it had Burt Lahr along with Virginia Mayo and Ruth Roman and Alan Hale and just a whole bunch of people. Uh, and then vaudevillians who were already losing their stature because vaudeville had died. And it's a wonderful film about a man who takes over for an older comedian and pushes him out of the way. And it's got all the comedy in it and all the routines in it, just as they were done. And then you have Milton doing a dramatic part, playing this overambitious younger guy who pushes Burt Lahr out of the way. And that's my favorite Milton Berle film. He uh, was a feather in his cap. He felt badly that the movie didn't do better. I mean, it was well received in the moment, but it wasn't one of those films that we think of as a classic film that's rerun over and over and over. In fact, it's very hard to find. It was done independently, based on his new notoriety on television, and never got the wide syndicated release on television. Other things did. That was important to him. I think working for President Kennedy was important to him. Um, and then there were highlights through the years. He loved working with Lucille Ball. Anytime he got a chance to work with her, it was a delight for him because he'd known her so long. He knew her before Desi Arnaz. He knew her before her first film. And she was literally just a model for Hattie Carnegie in New York City. So to see her arc up, in 1948, he becomes Mr. Television, but in 1951, she becomes the biggest star in the world. So he loved working with her. Those kinds of things. I think if it gave him a chance to do some dramatic acting, if it gave him a chance to break out of just telling jokes, or if the production was whoever the producer was or the director was, like, oh yeah, that director, Desi Arnaz. He worked with Desi on an Isle of Lucy hour-long special and liked it so much that he asked Desi to direct an episode of the Milton Berle Show.
Oh, wow.
And Lucille and Desi appeared on it. And that kind of thing meant a lot to him. And I think people like me meant a lot to him. When he could mentor young people, I think it was a happy day for him. When he could pass on all of this knowledge, and anybody else, they collect silver or they collect baseball cards or they have whatever it is you pass on to your children and grandchildren you own. But a comedian, once you're gone, the only thing you can pass on is the work you've already done. But if you're lucky, you get to mentor some young people and give them the benefit of your experience. And I think Milton really loved doing that.
Oh, wow. Well, I know one of the most famous movies he was involved in, of course, is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And you said that there was lots of stories surrounding that film and him being part of it. Indulge us.
All right, since you asked me so nicely. Well, first of all, how the film came about. Stanley Kramer had done two huge, very heavy dramas that were brilliant films with Spencer Tracy back to back. The last one being Judgment at Nuremberg. And Kramer was tired a little bit Spencer was tired a little bit. And they what if we did a comedy? And what they came up with was, if we're going to do a comedy, it better be the funniest film ever made, or we're going to get panned. So Stanley Kramer came up with the idea of doing a film where everybody in the film was a big star, in the biggest part, in the smallest part. That Spencer Tracy would be the titular star, starring in, but then everybody else was billed alphabetically. So there was, the Sid Caesars and the Ethel Mermans and the Edie Adams, they all got alphabetical billing. Then there were people underneath that, Rochester, Zesu Pitts. I mean, everybody who did anything in the film, there's no unknowns. They bit off more than they could chew. Maybe they chewed it eventually. But it was filmed 15 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. Most of the film was shot in the California desert on location. And for each person in the film, it meant something different. Sid Caesar was already battling drugs and alcohol. He'd lost his television show. This gave him a chance to shine. Now, I will tell you, his memories of making it are vague because he was not all there. He's very funny in the film. You can't tell he's not all there, but not all there. Edie Adams just lost her husband. And that's a story we should talk about sometime, because it's not what it seems. I know better.
Okay.
Ernie Kovacs' death was not exactly an accident. Ernie owed these people a lot of gambling debts and wasn't paying. He had an accident. Edie, to make sure that she didn't have an accident, had to pay off the debts. And everybody in show business hired her for everything, just to give her the income to do that. This film was one of the ways she paid off her debt for Ernie. That's why it was important to her. Ethel Merman had been on Broadway in Gypsy most recently, assumed that she was going to play the part in the film. Who else could play Mama Rose? Well, Rosalind Russell did, and it was a terrible movie. Merman was hurting. This film was going to be her, yeah, you wouldn't hire me for that? Well, look at this. Look at what you missed. And Merman steals the film from all of these wonderful comedians. Mickey Rooney had a television series that failed. He needed the money. He had a lot of ex-wives and mouths to support. Buddy Hackett had a wonderful agent who got him a series of films like The Music Man. And this time, for a little while there, Buddy Hackett was in one film after another, which helped his nightclub work, because the more famous you become, the more people come to see you. So everybody in the film, there was a reason why they were there. It wasn't just, oh, this will be fun. Everybody had an agenda, including Milton. Milton, who really has the lion's share of a dialogue in this film, other than Spencer Tracy, had just renegotiated his NBC contract to allow him to appear in things. In other words, it was no longer exclusive. Well, then it was also no longer very much money to keep him attached to NBC. And his income dropped significantly. Well, what's a good way to raise your rates in Las Vegas? Be in a big film. Get more famous again. Go up again. When you go up again, your rates go up again. You get booked in more places. You're asked to do more things. So for Milton, it was reignite a little bit, which everybody in show business has to do. The best piece of advice I was ever given in show, and it wasn't given by Milton, but Milton practiced this. You must continuously reinvent yourself.
Madonna has done that her whole career.
everybody who's had a long career has had to do it.
Yeah.
Because they get tired of the same old thing, or
Mm-hmm.
they're so used to you, or whatever it is you did becomes old fashioned.
Yep.
And you need to do something new fashioned. So this was something for Milton to do. It gave him a reason to be on talk shows. It gave him a reason to be interviewed on magazines and newspapers back when those things were terribly important to one's career. Today, it's all on the internet. But back then, print was very important. We've talked about Ethel and Merman because they were good buddies. Rumor has it they probably had a little bit of an affair at one point. And they started pulling jokes on each other during the making of the film. Ethel was hurting at this moment in her life. She'd been recently divorced. She didn't get the film. Wasn't a happy camper. And put all that energy into the film, and she's brilliant in it. But all the comedians, the big ones, you know, you're going to be listed in alphabetical order. Everybody gets paid the same money. Favored nations clause. There's no competition. And they had these giant, like, warehouse trucks that were refrigerated so that the cast could go inside and not die from dehydration and get their makeup fixed. And, you know, the film was shot over many, many months, but the cast is in the same hairstyle and makeup and dresses and suits because this all happens in one day in the film. So all the ladies wore wigs so that they would match from day to day and from month to month. They had multiple costumes the same. And Merman is, you know, sipping some tea, and Milton is bragging about something. And Milton hears that Merman's going to go to Los Angeles to get some dental work done. And he hears the name of the dentist. So he's, you know, further down, but in a loud booming voice, he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to have to go to the dentist soon. But you know what? I'm not going to Dr. X. I heard he's terrible. He's a quack." And Merman gets all upset and excited till everybody starts laughing and she realizes she's been had. So another day, same place, same situation. And no one had a louder voice than Ethel Merman. And she said, yeah. But what I'm happy about in this film is I get special billing and featuring Ethel Merman. And Milton heard that, like she's getting billing over him, and he starts to scream until everybody starts to laugh, and he realizes he's been had. Then there was a piece in the film where Merman's carrying a clutch bag, and she hits him over the head with it.
Okay.
Well, in the bag were 2 or 3 sets of the beads she wore around her neck, so that because she did a lot of physical comedy in that film. She got tossed on her rear end a couple of times. Should the beads break, they wouldn't have to stop shooting. She'd have them in her purse, just cut, replace. So she's hitting Milton, and he's like, Mama, stop hitting me, because she plays his mother-in-law in the film. And they all cut. And he goes, oh, I've been hit. I'm hurt. Ethel, come over here. And she puts her hand on his head. Feel that lump? You just did that. And Ethel was beside herself because she loved Milton, and that she'd ever hurt anybody like that. It was like, oh, what can I do? I'm so sorry. It was a joke. Milton had that lump on his head his whole life. So those kind of things went back and forth between them, all during the making of the film.
Well, probably lightened the mood up quite a bit too, because of things going on. Because I know this was an expensive project, but gained a massive following. That I believe it was one of the highest grossing films that year, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Of course, remember correctly, I wasn't alive then, but research it.
Yeah, kid.
Yeah.
I was alive then, and it debuted at the Cinerama Dome. So the movie was shot in Cinerama, which means the camera's lens was like this.
Uh-huh.
So special lighting, special makeup. It was a hard film to make. But Stanley Kramer, and I don't say this because I know his family so well, is my favorite director, film director. He was a genius. The genius in casting these people in these parts. You know, let's forget what the actors were going through. That Mr. Kramer knew Ethel Merman could do something like this. She'd never played a part like this in a film before. That he knew she could do it. That he knew Buddy Hackett could get into a character. I mean, he was still being Buddy, but get into a character. And, you know, there's one point where they're all talking about what they're going to do, because this bunch of people who meet him in the desert. And she's being an enormous pain in the ass. And Buddy is like, all right, now it's everybody for themselves, except you. And you, I just want you to drop dead. To know who to buy to say that line that would get its biggest punch. Stanley was a genius at that. And Milton acted. It's why he liked the part. Besides getting a chance to be funny, besides getting a chance to work with Ethel Merman, and he had a lot of scenes with Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas, if you don't know who he was a brilliant British comedian and actor. We also had Milton get a chance to play with Terry Thomas like that. And the dialogue going back and forth between them as they're both frustrated with each other. And you bosoms, what is it with your American men and bosoms? You have this bosom fascination. And Stanley was a genius at casting and at cutting, because even if you add in all the extra stuff that they cut out because the movie was too long, it's brilliantly done. It's Jonathan Winters. Where would Milton work with Jonathan Winters this way? And, you know, we could spend 2 hours just talking about the film, but it was a high mark for Milton because it gave him a chance to do a little bit of everything. Physical comedy, verbal comedy, a little bit of drama. He played a believable character. You believed that he was a little younger than he was, but he'd gotten this much younger, prettier wife and had to live with her shrewish mother. And Milton played this character who had just had a nervous breakdown. That's why they're in the California desert on vacation, because he went screaming in the streets naked. That kind of nervous breakdown. So there's just so much to play with there. There's so many layers of things to do. Everybody succeeded. Everybody delivered, and as did Milton. So it was a high mark for him. So I want to keep this about Milton. I'm afraid sometimes I go off on tangents, but we're talking.
Oh, that's okay. It goes back to it because, of course, Mad World, which major ensemble cast, but I mean, still, ensemble or not, you know, you get him and Spencer Tracy right there in the center of all of it. So, how did he feel about being not just within such an ensemble, but being like at the head of the table, so to speak?
I'm huffing and puffing because I don't know quite how to answer that. It was another job.
Yeah.
You know, he was booked to play Las Vegas right after the film was wrapped. He did work on behalf of the film. He and Merman and a whole bunch of people went on the Jerry Lewis show right after the world premiere. They took them by limo from the premiere to the Jerry Lewis show when he had a 2-hour failure on ABC. It was, see, for us as fans, we look at these things, you know, we've talked about Lucille Ball a lot. You know, how did she feel about stomping on the grapes? Well, other than feeling like she was walking on eyeballs, it was another show that had to get done, and it had to get done by Thursday night. There wasn't time to sit around and go, ooh, look what we're doing. or ooh, this is going to live in infamy forever, and in the next century, Greg and Geoffrey Mark are going to talk about. No, they were there to do a job, and the minute the day was over, they were on the phone to their agents. What's the next job? What's my next booking? Where am I going next? That's how they live. In my own life, when you're a youngster, when I was a youngster, I hoped I'd win an award someday, but it wasn't like I had this master plan for a Grammy and an Emmy. I didn't plan it that way. We've talked about Kitty Carlisle and myself and my ending up in her apartment. I didn't plan that. That's the way my career worked out. And for these people, although they were aware that it had the possibility of being a big hit film because Stanley Kramer had done several of these big hit films, it was another job. Nobody was, look at me, look what I get. Yeah, just let's do the work.
Okay. All right. With such a big film like that, have you ever, through conversation with him, I was just wondering what the most difficult part of filming that movie was for Milton? Oh, the heat. Okay.
For everybody. They tried to film it when it wasn't going to be 120 degrees, but it got hot early, and the film went on much longer than they thought it was going to. It took longer to film than they thought it was going to. And the hardest part was the heat and matching everything up. Most films go on and on and on, meaning it goes on over a period of days or weeks or years, right? This is all contained in one day. They had to be very, very strict about costuming, that your tone of voice matched how you spoke. And, maybe Milton Berle did a scene or two and then went to Las Vegas and wasn't there for 3 weeks and then came back to the film. And now he's finishing a scene he did 3 weeks ago. And you have to match everything you're doing, your movements, your tone of voice, how loudly you were speaking. That's not necessarily a very easy thing to do. When you're shooting on location, it makes it 100 times more difficult. If you're inside of a studio and you're filming things, you have control. But almost all of this film was shot on location someplace, whether it was the California desert or Santa Monica, California, or wherever they happened to be, wherever they could find a good outdoor location. Makes it so much tougher. And none of these people were young. I mean, Edie Adams wasn't old, but even she was at least in her 30s, late 30s. But for people, Jimmy Durante, to be out on the desert, you as my people say, schwitz. You perspire, you sweat, and you get dehydrated. And that was the hardest part. Was the long shoot, the heat, and staying in character. Because it's not like, okay, Milton, come in and do 10 minutes from your nightclub act now. No, you were doing a script that was punch, quick, fast. But it turned out so well. I mean, he was very proud of it. Everybody I spoke with, including Sid, was very proud to have been associated with it. I never met anybody who said, gosh, what a pain in the neck. Peter Falk was like, I wish I had a bigger part.
Yeah.
But not because the film was bad. He wished he had a bigger part.
Mm-hmm. But he got to be part of it.
And then Jack Carter complains that he wasn't asked to be in the film.
Well, I guess to Peter Falk's credit, at least you get to be part of it.
He was aware of that. He was happy with that. He just wished he'd had more to do because it was such a good film.
Absolutely.
And then, where would Peter Falk have worked with Rochester? Where else? Because Rochester, the Eddie Anderson who played Rochester, not long after the film was made, got ill, and in fact stopped being on Jack Benny's show because of it. So Peter got like the last of Rochester at his best because he got ill very soon thereafter. And he, again, proud of that. No one, Peter Falk didn't read a script and go, ooh, I'll get to work with Rochester one of the last times. You don't, it's just, that's how it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, with Milton, and I've asked this kind of question before, but with everybody it's different. His approach to stage versus his approach to on camera. Um, did he have a preference? And what was his preparation for either one? I'm assuming probably stage was harder because you're right there in front of everybody and you can't have somebody call cut.
No, sorry to disappoint you. It's just the opposite.
Oh.
People like Milton Berle come alive in front of an audience. The adrenaline rushes. See, because you're talking about being in front of an audience and being on a film. If we were discussing, let's say it's a Mad, 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 Mad World had been a play first in front of a live audience, and then you make a film of it. That's a worthy discussion because then you're talking about someone playing the same part, but how do you do it differently for a camera versus 2,000 people sitting there? But in this case, you're talking about Milton either being on television in front of people or being in a nightclub in front of people doing his own material versus one camera getting you. I think Milton appreciated the chance to do some actual acting as opposed to playing Milton Berle. All of us in show business to some degree are actors. Milton Berle was a made-up name and a made-up stage persona. Geoffrey Mark is not my real name, and I wasn't born with sequins. They didn't rip me out of my mother and go, hello. And that's not how it works. It's just a character you kind of invent for yourself that the audience likes. When you're doing something dramatic, it's a different set of muscles. It's like a sports analogy. Someone being a wonderful, wonderful basketball player and then being allowed to play baseball. And the different set of muscles you have to use to be good at it. Milton had all the muscles for the various kinds of work. Mad World wasn't his first film at all. He'd made a series of films for 20th Century Fox during the war years. He made some films in the late 30s. He made the film we talked about a little while ago in the late 40s. So it wasn't like this is his first experience. But if you're asking what did Milton enjoy more, being in front of an audience?
Let me see how to segue into this next question because
hey, I'm the prince of segues. Give me a topic, I'll segue for you.
Well, I've been thinking about this in the back of my mind because okay, you knew Milton, and what is something that you can share that you're able to share about him that nobody else knows that you're able to share?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Prince of segues.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about someone I've already talked about. Milton deeply cared for Lucille Ball.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the dating situations where his mother interfered. He would have liked to have actually had a deep relationship with her. He really cared for her. Sarah interfered. I won't say more than that. But I don't think people know that. He didn't publicize that. Miss Ball certainly didn't publicize that. Um, by the time she became a huge star and Desi was in her life, discussing who she was with before Desi was not a very good idea. And Desi and Milton were friends. So she didn't want to hurt that relationship. I'm not saying that Milton and Miss Ball carried on all through their lives. I'm saying there was a moment in time in the early 30s where they were being intimate, and that evolved into a friendship as time went along. And he never really discussed the intimate part. He did with me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
You're smiling.
well, I'm stirring things in my mind about, um, he's done so much in his career. So there goes my stomach. Um, so much in his career that, let me see, how do I put this? We talked about it's a mad, 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 mad world.
Yes.
And we can't dive into every performance he's done.
I can
What?
tell you about a disappointment for him.
Okay. All right. All right. Go for that.
Sure. Well, Mad World opened a lot of doors for a lot of people. Prince of Segways.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very long after Mad World came out that Peter Falk got into the Trials of O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
And Edie Adams had her own television show. It opened doors for people.
Mm-hmm.
For Milton, one of the things it did to reignite all of the publicity he did for Mad World. And then he appeared on the Lucy show and reminded people how wonderful he was. He got an offer from ABC to come back and do the Milton Berle show again, to come back. He had not done a weekly or semi-weekly variety show since the 1959-1960 season, and that had been a half an hour, the Kraft Music Hall with Milton Berle. So it had been 5 or 6 years since he had been on television every week doing a variety show. And ABC gave him the opportunity to come in. He realized he couldn't do the same show he'd done on NBC in the 40s and 50s. It was old-fashioned. It was very vaudeville-like. Television had grown up. Variety shows had grown up. His was among the very first variety shows ever on television. Well, now there had been dozens of them. It was being done in California, not in New York City. It was being done on videotape, not live, in color. And he thought, this is great. I'm going to have work now for years from this. And it lasted 1 season and got canceled. I remember watching it as a young person and loving it, just thinking he was wonderful on it. I have 2 episodes of it. One with Lucille Ball and one with Adam West playing off of the Batman craze on ABC. And again, Milton didn't have those either, and I gave them to him. He was very disappointed. He gave up his NBC contract for that. For him to appear every week on ABC, NBC was no longer paying him anything. Even though NBC wasn't paying very much. I think originally it was $100,000 a year. And then when he asked for the exclusivity clause to go away, it went down to $50,000 a year. And I think at one point it was down to even $20,000 a year. But in the middle 1960s, $20,000 a year was still more than most people made. $20,000 a year, you could have a house and a car and a vacation every year. It was nice money. I don't have the math head to figure out what $20,000 would be today, but I'll bet it would be over $100,000, maybe even closer to $200,000 a year. So he gave up the security financially, thinking that he'd have a show for 5 years. Didn't work out. And it disappointed him. It was a crapshoot, and he lost. And Milton liked to gamble. Milton didn't like losing at gambling. He didn't like losing in his career. Uh, it was a thorn in his side that he'd been Mr. Television, and then by the early 1960s, he wasn't on every week anymore. Television had marched on without him. And then to try to come back, it was kind of like what Lucille Ball did in the 80s with Life with Lucy, trying to come back and failing, and you really lick your wounds over that. So that was one where he talked of just real disappointment that it wasn't what he'd hoped it would be. And the show was funny. I think maybe ABC pushed him into using too many young people, rock and roll groups, ABC stars on other shows, as opposed to allowing him to bring on all his friends and play with them. If they would have allowed Milton Berle to bring on, Jimmy Durante and Bob Hope and all the people he knew and loved, and the great singers he knew and loved, I'm sure Milton would have had Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Ella Fitzgerald and the best, because they all knew him and they all loved him. They wanted, no offense, Connie, she's a friend. They wanted Connie Stevens. They wanted the British invasion rock groups. They wanted people who were doing ABC sitcoms. And it was a good gimmick to have on Adam West. And then he had on the people from the Green Hornet. So he had Bruce Lee and Van on. But they're not comedians, and they're not variety show performers. They're just there because they're a name that's in the news. And that might work on a talk show, but on a variety show, if you can't do a sketch and you can't sing and you can't dance and you can't do stand-up, why are you there? It didn't work.
Yeah. Well, he's had a long, long career. So I won't ask this on his perspective. I'll ask this on your perspective. What are some of your favorite performances of his, whether it be on film, stage, television? What are some of your favorite choice performances by him?
Well, I've already said Always Leave Them Laughing.
Mm-hmm.
An amazing film. To see Milton doing classic vaudeville and burlesque routines, just you won't see it anyplace else. I love that. Mad World, I love that. You can almost pick any episode of the Texaco Star Theater from its first 2 or 3 seasons. They're all extraordinary. It's live. There's one commercial, one, by Texaco in the middle of the show. That's it. You have 58 minutes of variety going on. He had movie stars, he had vaudeville stars, he had nightclub stars, he introduced young people. He was a very early proponent of bringing on African-American performers who might not get a chance to be seen or were making their television network debut. He believed in young talent. And any of those shows, certainly the moment with Merman where you're gouging each other's eyes out on television, is a highlight. He did 1 or 2 episodes. He did several with Lucille Ball, but 1 or 2 that are really extraordinary. He does an episode of a Lucy show. The one that's best remembered is that Lucille Ball is playing Mrs. Carmichael, who's Mr. Mooney's secretary at the bank. And they kind of toss out the show for a week, and she's taking on a temporary job. Mr. Mooney's letting her be Milton Berle's secretary for a while because Milton Berle is producing a movie and he's working at home. And the episode had Milton and his wife, Ruth, and my good buddy, Ruta Lee, in it. And it's fairly well written. It gives everybody some good comedy lines. The build-up is that Mrs. Carmichael through the intercom, hears Milton and Ruta playing themselves on the show, rehearsing a love scene, thinking it's for real and that he's cheating on Ruth, his wife, who's also there, behind their backs. And Lucy, the character, is supposed to make him a Caesar salad for lunch. And she gets fed up with him and goes into the living room and takes the Caesar salad and tosses it on his head so that the bowl, the big wooden bowl it's in, sits on his head. And then they had dialogue. Well, that kind of thing, although they rehearsed all the movements of the dialogue, they didn't rehearse it with the salad because you're getting all filthy and wet. Miss Ball always did a dress rehearsal on a show in front of an audience. Well, you can't do that twice. You're ruining all the costumes and you're getting the set all dirty. So they didn't know what would happen under the lights. Well, the dressing ran a lot. And once Milton heard the laughs, remembering who Milton is, he jiggled his head just enough to make it fall more and more and more. Well, no one could say a word of dialogue. The audience was screaming, howling at this. But the problem is, and then, that's Milton Berle, the performer. Milton Berle, the producer, suddenly realizes, holy cow, if we let this go on, the show is going to go way too long. And they can't cut this because it's continuous, right? If you cut it, you can see that it doesn't match up. But they have to get back to the dialogue. And one of the ways on stage, if this happens in front of an audience, is for a character to get angry, because it gives him a chance to raise his voice and do this. You bring the audience out of it. It's like, okay, audience, we have a plot here. Come on. And Milton and Lucille start screaming at each other. And the audience won't stop. So they have to repeat their lines. And Ruta at this point is just gagging from laughing. She's got like one sentence and she can hardly get it out of her throat. It's like, yes, because it's something. It was not in the script, at least not this way. It was light in a bottle, and there it was. And Miss Ball won an Emmy that year as Best Actress in a sitcom, and I think this episode is one of the reasons why. So that's a big high point for Milton. It's a funny thing. This is an ongoing joke. We'll never know why. I wasn't there. Ruta didn't ask. Milton didn't ask. And I've talked to both Ruta and Milton about this. Lucille Carmichael runs upstage to answer the door. They're ding dong, ding dong. And she opens it, and Ruta's standing there. And she turns from Ruta to the audience and goes, "It's Ruta Lee, the movie star." Just like that. Well, Ruta was a star, but she wasn't the big movie star. She was a television and stage person. And slams the door in her face and then opens the door again. After that show was shot, every time Milton saw Ruta, especially in front of an audience or at a red carpet or at a party, he would go, "It's Ruta Lee, the movie star," and embarrass the hell out of her. After Milton died, I started doing it. Every time I saw Ruta, "It's Ruta." And she said, "Jeff, let's let that one die. It died with Milton. Let it go." She appreciated the humor, but it was getting old for her.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's a joke that went on. I mean, that show was shot in 1967, and Milton was still doing it in 1987, and I was still doing it in 2007. So that's a long inside joke.
Any other performances by him that stand out for you that
Yeah, Milton did for PBS in the 70s a couple of things where he played dramatic parts.
Oh, okay.
And was very good. And then there was a TV movie, I think it was in the 80s. Milton plays a wealthy kind of dying man who has, I believe, two sons, one of whom runs his business for him and takes care of him and does everything he wants, and one who was much younger, like a late in life child, a boy, who was a grown up. And although Milton's character doesn't know it, he's gay. And this kid is spoiled and entitled and is spending Milton's money and lying to his father about all the chicks he's having sex with. And meanwhile, he's using the money for drugs and to buy male prostitutes. And it was a very heavy drama. And Milton was wonderful in it. See, Milton was a good actor. Not every comedian is necessarily, but Milton just oozed talent. He could sing. You wouldn't want to buy a Milton Berle album necessarily, but he made recordings and he wrote songs. Sam, you made the pants too long. That was his song. He wrote the lyrics to that. Milton could dance, not necessarily Bob Fosse choreography, but if the part called for dancing, he could do it. He just one of those people who oozed talent. And I never saw him fail. I never saw Milton not be funny, not be good, not be on. I never watched him perform and thought, ooh, too bad. I saw him in shows where I thought, ooh, that show stinks. But isn't Milton good? So it's hard to pick out. I think that one where he had the gay son, that episode of a Lucy show, the two movies we've talked about, and then the videos are out there. Look at his early television career and see how wonderful he was, and watch how he changed, because the show was straight vaudeville when it first started, and after a while, the ratings began to slip just a little bit. Well, Milton changed the show so that it was kind of like a sitcom with variety in it, where he played Milton Berle, the star of a television show every week. And then he added color to it. And then he began filming some of the episodes. And then some weeks he was doing a drama. He was constantly reinventing himself so that the audiences wouldn't get bored with him. That whole television career from 48 to 60 is just, I don't think anybody else has done that. So much work, doing so many different kinds of work, and doing it so well.
Yeah. Well, here's a deep question for you.
Oh, I love it deep.
What is, and you might have already touched upon this, but I'm going to go deeper with this. What is the greatest advice that he gave you and left with you?
Be true to yourself.
Okay.
I think what he meant was, don't try to copy anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to get somebody else's career. Don't be a second-rate somebody else. Be a first-rate Jeff. He said, you're funny. Let yourself be funny. Don't be afraid of being funny. If you're around somebody who's funnier than you are, shut your mouth and learn. That's okay. You don't have to be the star all the time, but learn. Use it. If you're around, there were evenings I was around dozens of comedians better than I. Well, I sat there and said nothing because I had nothing to bring to the party. This was a learning experience for me. I'm still learning. I still love to surround myself with people who are better than I am so I can learn from them. And
Okay.
I think Milton was also in some way encouraging me. I, to the best of my knowledge, have never gone on a nightclub stage or a television stage or any kind of a stage and pretended to not be gay. I never did girlfriend jokes or wife jokes. I just didn't do that. I'm not saying I did gay humor. I just did Jeff humor. What makes me laugh? What observations tickle me? And I think Milton was encouraging me that it was okay to do that, that what I brought to the table was being Geoffrey Mark. And as long as I brought him to the table, I'd be successful. Don't try to be anybody else.
Okay. Well, here's an expanded question. What do you think kind of legacy he has left, in your opinion?
You have to look for legacy here.
Mm-hmm.
My children and grandchildren don't know who he is. He didn't have a sitcom that got forever rerun over and over again for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you see It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, chances are young people are not going to see his movies. They're not going to listen to his radio stuff. But the legacy is there of extraordinary hard work, of an encyclopedic. I've been called by critics an encyclopedia of pop culture.
I could see that.
I get that from Milton. Milton knew everything about show business. So his incredible knowledge of what came before and what happened while he was a part of it is a huge legacy. For those who care about television, television has changed tremendously just since COVID. No one's watching networks anymore. They're not even watching cable. They're watching platforms. So show business keeps evolving. But if you want to know where it came from, all these platforms, all this stuff, what we're doing right now, it came from Milton Berle. All of it, Saturday Night Live, came from Milton Berle. He's the granddaddy of all this stuff. He's on television 3 seasons before I Love Lucy. That's how early he's in this stuff. He's the one who designed the studios at 30 Rock at NBC in New York. He was the one who helped design the color studios. They've now sold the building in Burbank, but NBC had all its color shows coming out of. He made the template for this kind of thing that they're still following when they have variety on television. He made the template for being a nightclub comedian. Nightclubs didn't have a lot of comedians early on. Nightclubs were a place to dance and drink and eat, and maybe hear a singer, maybe. But you heard comedians in vaudeville. You heard comedians on stage. He's the one who kind of made it, no, we're going to be funny in a nightclub. And he learned how to be funny. This is a big deal to people who are drinking and getting drunk, who are eating their food, who are smoking cigarettes, who are playing with each other under the tables because they're on a date. How do you compete with all of that? Milton Berle showed you how. So there's no part of show business that you can point to that doesn't have Milton Berle's fingerprints all over it. But you have to know that. The legacy is there. It's just that young people don't know that what they're watching are Milton's fingerprints. But we showed them today, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love it having you come on here, and I love it too, especially when I have a guest that I'm able to sit back and just let them go. I love engaging, but I'll tell you, when I get somebody on there that just tells the story, and I'm letting all this illuminate in my mind as you're telling it, so
you don't mind that I took over your show?
You know what? No, because people want to see the guest.
But you know why I do it? That is something Milton taught me.
Yeah.
When you're on a show, don't ever, ever, ever be boring. And if you feel there's a lag, take over. Because the person you're with will be grateful. You're making their show better. If I'm good on your show, they're going to talk about Greg Gilbert. They're going to talk about your show. Canada is talking about you, not me necessarily. Just, he has these great guests, but it's his show. So when I go on television, or I'm on, sometimes I'm on local TV, I'm on the news at 5 o'clock. I just take over. Because everybody asks the same questions um, in that kind of a format. They've
Mhm.
only got 6 or 7 minutes to fill. Gee, what's it like being Geoffrey Mark? Yeah, get out of my way. Hi, folks. Here's 6 minutes of funny, because I can. That was what Milton taught me to do, so that no matter what the show is, I look good. And if I look good and the host is smart, he or she realizes that they look good too.
I got to admit, though, speaking of looking good, I love the red facial hair, but I also like it. You got white strip going down like that. I think that looks cool.
Thank you. Thank you. That was
Yeah.
my hairdresser's idea. He said if
Oh
you
wow.
he said if you make this white, it makes your face look longer and people will think it looks cool. So we've done our job. Thank you.
There you go. You're all sparkly today.
I'm all sparkly every day. You know that.
Yes.
I've been
Yes.
sparkly for decades.
Yeah. Well, you certainly lifted my spirits. Like I said, with the job I had, we've not done a very good job at keeping people, and when you get a fill in for people, um, yeah, it takes its toll on. So I'm really glad you were patient with me today, and my apology. I think I was five minutes getting on here today, and it was like,
Hey,
wow,
Greg, we're buddies, Greg. It's no problem.
yeah, you could tell it was taking its toll on me, but hopefully I'm gonna have better stability, because I got that awesome phone call last week, so I should have better stability, both job wise and financially. So I'm looking forward to that. But always love hearing your stories. And I had somebody ask me is who what guests I've had the most on my show. I believe you're it.
I'm proud.
Yeah, I'm proud too. Like I said, this is the fifth tribute we've done. You've done Lucille Ball, Ella
We have.
Fitzgerald,
We have.
Mary Tyler Moore,
We have.
Steve Allen. That one there is not up because it was one of the 2020 ones. My brother, although I'm going to tell you, I listened to it because I've got the interview. I just don't know how to put it up.
We've done about 10 shows together now, and I'm happy.
Yep,
I
and
love performing for Canada. I love my
mhm,
Canadian fans are wonderful. I get such wonderful feedback, and I
mhm.
love being on with you.
Yeah, but the Steve Allen one will eventually go up. But my brother right now, like I said, he's dealing with two uh, uh, not so well parents right now, and so
And
I've had.
hey, you know what? If it becomes too much a problem, we'll just redo it.
Oh no, no, I've got it.
Okay.
I've got it.
All right.
Oh yeah, I've listened to it. It's just a matter of translating it to YouTube because I'm not very tech savvy. This I can get on to YouTube, no problem. I
Well,
just don't. Yeah,
so
that's
folks, obviously we're pre-recording this. So when you let me know this is going to be up, I'll let all my fans know on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and
mhm.
we'll let everybody know when to watch this. And hopefully you guys will enjoy it, because it's always a pleasure to be here.
Hopefully they best enjoy it. If not for me and for you, because you, like I said, like I don't need to speak. Just listening to you, like you're so well spoken. I know I sound like a broken record when I say it, but you're so well spoken and such a
Yeah,
vast
Mr.
knowledge.
Mark will let you know when Mr. Mark is getting bored with getting compliments. So keep talking, please.
But this is the fifth tribute we've done, like a lot of people, and then of course we did three with just you, and again, those are great too. So yeah, you've been on here 8 times. That's impressive for me. So yeah, and I love doing the tributes when I get the chance. It allows us to celebrate and highlight somebody who's not with us anymore. And I love the idea that you're able to keep these memories and these artists alive, you know.
That's my
Yeah,
job.
yeah. Of course, they don't have to put up with what's going on in society now.
Yeah, but you know what? We're here to have fun. See, that's why we have show business. No matter what part of history you stick your finger into, there are problems.
Hmm.
We get to give people a break from their problems and give them some joy and give them some fun and make them laugh or sing a great song. And that's why we're here. That's why, at least that's
Hmm.
why I'm here anyway.
Yeah. Well, Milton Berle, I think. Let me see. I got to because I got his the Wikipedia on here, and let me see. Pat 2002. Oh
Yeah.
well, March 27th. We're approaching the anniversary of. He was 93, so he lived a good old
Yeah. We're
age.
pretty much of a 20th anniversary of his death.
Yeah. Well, gee, he was born the same year, I believe, as James Stewart. Was he 1908 as well? I believe so.
Probably, possibly.
Yep. Wow. He's born. My birthday's July 8th. His birthday's July 12th. Okay.
Yeah, but different years.
Different years. Yeah. Yeah, by far. By far. But he went right up. He was born even before the first motion picture came out, you know. So I mean, he got to see all of that happen and have.
Like I said, his fingerprints are all over everything.
But passing in 2002, um, you know, you had the internet, not the way it is today. What do you think his take would be, or how he would address what technology is now?
He'd be the leader.
He'd be the leader.
He'd own his own platform. He would, whatever it took, he would have adapted to it.
Hmm.
He did cable. Milton Berle did one of the very first HBO specials. And it was a special on magic, of all things, because Milton was a talented magician. And
Ah.
Lucille Ball was his guest on that very early on in HBO. So he was ready for cable. He was ready for the growth of television. He was ready for anything. As long as he could perform, Milton adapted to it. So the longer he would have lived, just it would have been more fingerprints and more fingerprints.
Well, that's what we like to hear. And he definitely made a fingerprint on your life, which
Oh,
is
yes.
pretty awesome, you know. Is there any last things you want to say about him before we close off here?
It was an honor, you know. I can't speak how a young man who likes to play baseball might feel about meeting a hero.
Hmm.
I don't have that experience. I have had the experience of meeting, dining, working with, laughing with, sometimes crying with most of my heroes.
Hmm.
I am the luckiest son of a gun on the planet. Knowing Milton Berle, every time I was with him after whatever the event was over or lunch was over, I walked away saying, I just spent time with Milton Berle. I never took it for granted because there he is. And he's nice to me and he likes me and he encourages me and he helps me. And your head kind of spins around that a little bit. It wasn't all the important people I've met, the famous people I've met, it's not coming to me. It's always an honor for me. And that they see me as a peer, what a huge honor it is for me. So it's not, oh, just another celebrity I know.
Hmm.
It's a legend. And a legend touched me, and I'm a better performer because of it. I have a better career because of it. And maybe I'm a better person too.
I think you're a better person because, like I said, with your even going back to your friendship with Steve Allen, um, it kind of really like it reminds me of my friendship with a Canadian actress, Lisa Langlois,
Oh yeah.
who I've had on my show a couple times, and she called me this week to congratulate me on my new job, and she was the one that invited me to my first convention, and I know she's got the career, but when I think of her now, I think of her as my friend,
Right.
and I've had a few guests I've able to make that translation with, to friendship. And it's really rewarding because then it's like there's a big trust there, and there's a really nice connection. I like that. So, and you've definitely had that, I love hearing your stories. I love hearing you tell them. And
I'm
I
glad and have me back again.
are you going to do a book about Milton Berle?
Do you know why I won't? And it's a sad truth. Not because he doesn't deserve it. He does.
Uh-huh.
No one will buy it. Um, there is a point of saturation now with stars of Milton's age who are already gone 20 years. Their fan base has died off, unfortunately. Us baby boomers is getting old, and the generations just after me might know who he is. The young folks have no idea who he is. So publishers don't like. I've said this to you before. I would
Mm.
love to write the definitive book about Dinah Shore. I adored her. She was wonderful, and 6 people would buy it. So the publisher won't take that. They will only publish something they think they're going to make money on. And unfortunately, the great classic stars just it's becoming a diminishing return. There are 1 or 2 publishers out there who will publish for free,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't get paid. I'm not spending years of my life not to get paid anymore. I am beyond working for free. So it has to be something where I'll make some money too. And unfortunately, just it won't happen. I hope somewhere along the way, maybe they do a movie of his life because it's fascinating if they tell the truth.
Yeah,
And if they
absolutely.
do, I'll be happy to be a worker on that.
Yes, absolutely. Who do you think would play him?
Oh, gosh. I'm not off the top of my head seeing anybody who can do what he did, who are young enough to do it. There are some people. Steve Martin could possibly have done it when he was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Robin Williams perhaps could have done it when he was with us. You need someone of tremendous energy who can do vaudeville stuff and do burlesque stuff and do monologues and sing and dance and be silly like he was. Milton did what he called lappy jokes, meaning you put it right in the lap of the audience. They didn't have to think about it. It wasn't, oh, isn't that smart and clever? No, it was like, ha ha ha. That's the kind of humor he did. It takes a special kind of talent to do it. Um, I'm not physically big enough to be Milton. Milton was a tall guy and physically imposing. I'm not physically imposing. I could do it, but I'm also, probably a little too old to play Milton as a young man now. I honestly don't know anybody out there. Um, Justin Timberlake is about the only person I can think of who is so multi-talented that he could do anything.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe Justin Timberlake could do it.
Okay, okay. That's a good answer. It's a good answer. It's funny you mentioned today's generation don't know who he is. I'm gonna be honest. I watch my Blu-rays on my television. Um, I don't turn my radio on in my car. I just if I find something on YouTube, I'll let it play through my phone onto my car radio or whatever. I don't know what the top of the music charts are right now or any of that stuff. I don't follow it, so I don't. There's a lot of people that they say are stars today that are not going to have Milton Berle's
No,
legacy.
very few did. You know, stars last about 5 years,
Uh
usually.
huh.
The ones who become legends last longer. You go
Mm-hmm.
back, you watch Saturday Night Live from 20 years ago, and look who the hosts are. And you go, who? Why were they hosting? Oh, because they had a big movie out that year, but the
Mm-hmm.
career didn't last. The same thing with the pop singers. You go, oh, they were really hot in 1997. We haven't heard from them in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Not everybody in show business gets to have a very long career. Milton was extraordinary. I've been very lucky. Um, but yeah, it's a change in environment. Speaking of being lucky, can I one plug real fast?
Mm-hmm.
If you like jazz, you like Ella Fitzgerald, I have a show. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella is available everywhere where you can hear podcasts on every platform, and it's on radio stations around America, hopefully coming soon to Canada.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's like going back what we said about Madonna. The reason why she's still relevant, she reinvents herself. So I think that's a struggle for a lot of artists reinventing themselves successfully. So
I've been a lucky
yeah,
guy.
you've been a lucky guy. And Sparkly,
And I've worked my ass off. So
you
it's all of
have.
those things put together.
Yes, and you should have more Emmys on your shelf.
Time isn't over yet. We'll see.
Hmm. Yeah. You know what, Geoffrey? Thank you for your patience with me today. I'm always honored to have you on, and glad we were able to do this. Um, like I said, you're one of these guests. I look forward to having you on when you're on, and you're very talented. And I even loved it when you sang when you were on here that time. Like you,
We'll do that again.
hey, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I love being with you. I got up early on a Sunday to do this with you. So I love being with you. I wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was late getting on here and I was like, oh my goodness, was I hit that bad with work?
yeah,
But
but our friends don't know the difference. They only know that you're here and handsome and having a wonderful time. So they don't know what else is going on.
well, you know what? Like I said, this is great to be able to do this, and I love it. And yeah, I'll always have you back.
Cool and groovy. So, Canada, thank you for listening and watching. I've had a lot of fun. And as I always end my shows, God bless and have a happy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for joining me today, celebrating the life and legacy in your friendship with Milton Berle and allowing us to um, a little insight into what made him tick.
Yes, sir.
And of course, you got experience that in your own career, and I'm glad you took away so many great things from him and any other artists that you've had
Yeah,
the
there are fingerprints all over me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much for allowing me the honor.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care, man.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.